Okay, let's put this all together. Here's a graph of a function f. But before we begin, let's label some interesting points here. I'm going to begin with where the graph begins. So this function f begins at -11, 0 and ends at 9, 9. Now I'm going to label all the turning points because we'll use those to define increasing and decreasing intervals, to define local minimums and maximums, and also possibly to define absolute maximums and minimums. So let's get those labeled. So here's a turning point at -8, -4. Here's one at -2, +6. Here's a couple of sharp turning points. One is at 1, 0, another at 3, 0. Here's a turning point here at 2, 8. And now I have everything labeled so I can start answering these parts to the question. So list the intervals on which f is increasing. These are the x values. And we do that in interval notation. And increasing, decreasing, and constant intervals are always open intervals. That means use parentheses. So increasing from -8 to -2. It's increasing again from 1 to 2. And one more, it's increasing from 3 to 9. Now let's list the intervals on which f is decreasing. We'll grab a different color. It's decreasing from -11 to -8. It's also decreasing from -2 to 1. And finally, it's decreasing from 2 to 3. Where does f have a local maximum? So where is the x values again? So again, where means x. Well, I'm looking from left to right and looking for local maximums. The turning point -2, 6, that's a local maximum. Where it happens is at x equals -2. We have another local maximum at 2, 8, that turning point, but the x value is just 2. What are the local maximum is the y values. So I see it's 6 at +2 and it's 8 at x equals, excuse me, I said that backwards. It's 6 at -2 and it's 8 at x equals +2. Now where, again, we're going back to where, so that means I need to look for x values of local minimums. So I see a couple of local minimums, and they would be at -8, at 1, and at 3. But one of those is actually also an absolute. So -8, 1, and 3. Part F, what are the local minima? Well, that's the y values. So I have -4 and 0 happened at 1 and at 3. Part G, where does f have an absolute maximum? Well, the highest point on this graph on its domain from -11 to +9 is the y value of 9. So at x equals 9 is the absolute maximum, and the absolute maximum also happens to be 9. But remember, this is the y value. Now where does f have an absolute minimum? Remember I mentioned before one of those local minimums is also the absolute minimum. So the lowest point on the graph is at y equals -4. So at x equals -8, the absolute minimum is -4, because remember, that's the y value. What is the y value?